This is Carolina Haints. Carolina Haints presents Folk, a show about our stories. I'm your host, Dan Sellers. If you're a fan of the Carolina Haints podcast, or maybe you've read our book, then perhaps you're familiar with my deep fascination with Native American tales of little people. Over the years, we've talked about the famed Moonite people and the fairies of Chimney Rock. If you haven't heard those episodes, I highly suggest you give them a listen. These stories are incredible and can really get your mind working in a different way. Today we're talking about a special group of little people the Cherokee fondly referred to as Yunwi. And yes, we did briefly talk about the Cherokee little people before on previous episodes, but this episode will be completely devoted to their legend. Now, much like the Moonite people, the Yunwi were said to have inhabited the land we know as the Blue Ridge Mountains ages before the Cherokee migrated south. But unlike the Moonite people, the Cherokee had a symbiotic relationship with the Yunwi. They were able to peacefully coexist. The Yunwi were said to have lived in caves along the mountains of Appalachia. They were said to be about 1.5 feet to even 3 feet tall. They had long, flowing black hair that almost touched the ground they walked on. Many sketchings made them appear much like the Cherokee themselves, but perhaps maybe with dwarfism. And while the Moonite people only came out at night, the Yunwi were slightly more reclusive. They tended to stick to themselves and mainly inhabited their own spots in the forest. If you were lucky, maybe you could spot them or hear them traveling as a group. To be honest, whether you were lucky or unlucky depended on the type of little people you ran into. Yes, there were various clans with differing personalities. The Cherokee knew the Yunwi to have lived in 3 distinct tribes, but there may have been more lost to history. The Laurel people were a group of pranksters who spent most of their time drumming and dancing. They loved people and were fond of making jokes at people's expenses, or even leading people astray for their own amusement. Ultimately, the Laurels were harmless and cheerful little people, whereas the Dogwood people were more benevolent and helpful to humans. They were known to share their gifts and help the Cherokee from time to time, especially when needed. They didn't necessarily like humans trespassing in their parts of the mountains, but they were mostly tolerable and would rather help humans find their way home safely. It's been said that some dogwoods have been known to take in missing children in the woods, feed and nurture them, and then return them home the following day. The third group are much different and go by the Rock people. These are the little people you don't want to run into alone in the woods. They're a bit more mean-spirited and were known to cast spells or make people get lost in the wilderness on purpose. There's another thing I find quite fascinating about the Yunwi. Part of the Cherokee's belief is that nowadays, only medicine men or certain Cherokee people can see them for what they really are. Everybody else tends to see them as glowing balls of light. While I've never heard the Yunwi attributed to the Brown Mountain Lights in the Linville Gorge, I must say it sounds as plausible of an explanation as any I've heard yet. This episode was brought to you by Wreak Havoc Productions and Carolina Haints Incorporated, a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting folklore storytelling throughout the Carolinas. You can find everything we're up to, including the Carolina Haints book, podcast episodes, and speaking engagements at our website, carolinahaints.com. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Tune in then to keep the tradition of oral storytelling alive.